Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to another episode of Professor Drew's Lab. You have some more questions? I have some more answers. Let us begin. Iron Knuckles 24. Is there production of Pokemon to explain Pokemon like Dial-Up and or Klink? For the region, a lot of the more mechanical Pokemon have just sort of been evolving with technological advancements, because that's something that I actually find really fascinating. So I'm glad to have an opportunity to kind of talk about it for a second here. Pokemon like Magnemite and the Klinklang line are drawn to places where humans are making vast leaps in technological advancement. So the more power they're generating, the more these creatures are attracted to that place. So as power stations get set up in the Laris region and go from like wood burning stoves to, an electric grill into, further and further different things. I think it's fascinating to have Pokemon try to do the same thing. So when you get your first radios and stuff, that's around the time that Dial-Up would have started to emulate what people are doing. But now that they have a, semi-nuclear reactor built in Fola, a lot of the more newer shiny model Magnemites have moved on and become smoother and a little bit sleeker and less grating on the ears than Dial-Up. But that's why I love Dial-Up so much. Moving on from that, on that note, could you create a Pokemon and somehow give it moves like Thundershock? Spoiler warning. Cue the Stonebreaker. Absolutely, yes. You can create a Pokemon, but the implications are very dark and quite sinister in most cases of that. Usually every time somebody has tried to make a new species or alter an existing species, there have been immense consequences for the people and creatures involved. So yes, it is theoretically possible, because there's another little blurb on that I can't get into too much, but like, would it be possible for D to invent a new Pokemon? Potentially, yes, but not in the way that you're thinking, I don't think. Let's carry on. Aiden Harris. Will CJ ever be able to get his tombstone back? And also, how far away is CJ from being a normal person? The first part of this is hard to say. If that's something he were to pursue, chase down Lord Ridgemont and make him an offer he can't refuse, potentially. But again, that's up to CJ to come up with. How far away is CJ from being a normal person to Kaya? CJ is very far away from being like Kaya, and in the absence of the tombstone, it's unlikely that he'll get to that point. He's a small step away, tombstone-wise, from being like a normal person. He just has a couple abilities. But that also just sort of depends on your definition of normal, because CJ is our very special wild boy. But let's move on. Sunny has some questions. I remember in the session before the whole forest and mansion fiasco, Bentley was interacting with a Shiddinja, and I was wondering how that Shiddinja would work in terms of its ability. Would it have 1 HP like in the games and have the ability Wonder Guard, or would you tweak it so that moves are normally effective could hit? I'm just wondering about how broken Wonder Guard could be, and so on and so on. I will tell you, I do have stats made for the Shiddinja, just on the off chance that Bentley had wanted to catch it. It's probably not as busted as you think it is. So given the nature of how you get one, where you have the Ninkata and you have 2 spots in your inventory, and you get it to evolve, and then Shiddinja pops up in your inventory, or inventory is a weird way to say that, like shows up on your team. That's what I mean to say, not inventory. That makes it seem weird. But yes, it does have 1 hit point for the purposes of our game. Its ability is pretty cool, but I don't want to spoil that on the off chance we ever get to use it. So I won't get into that too much just now. All you need to know is it functions exactly like you would expect. If a super effective move would hit it, it will be knocked out. But it's not like immediately killed. We don't use the overkill rules for Shiddinja. The easiest way I can probably describe it, if you've played more traditional like 5e D&D, Shiddinja is much closer to if you had like a scroll or an item that would let you temporarily summon an elemental or like a demon to fight for you. They would pop up, they would make a couple attack rolls, and then at the end of the combat, they would just kind of whisk away. That's probably the closest hint I can give you without like ruining the surprise if it ever shows up again. But moving on, you have some further questions on Shiddinja. In terms of the Dex entry about how it steals the souls of those that look into the hole in its back, is that something you would incorporate into the campaign? I try really hard not to incorporate all of the random, inconsistent, like insane ravings that are in the game Dex entries. They're really fun for the games, but the more you start to look at them, the more impossible the whole idea of like this world is not just a dangerous death trap becomes. So no, I get this question a lot on a lot of Pokemon. I'm like, oh, would you use this or would you use this? But the fact that they'll just say like, oh, Victory Bell's stomach can literally dissolve anything, that has implications beyond just like, oh man, that would be terrifying if you got like dropped in there and it started digesting you. I'm like, no, that thing could dissolve anything. So if it spilled over, would the acid just go to the core of the earth? And those are questions I don't want to have to deal with. So I try not to use the Dex entries when they're that crazy. I'm not going to say it's never happened where I've gone through, had an idea for an encounter, kind of scoped out the Dex entries to see if there's anything I could use. But most of the time I try not to, just because there's so many random lines in there that just don't make sense. Like Blastoise could punch a hole through steel, but water and steel don't really do anything to each other. It's a whole thing. But TLDR, probably not. We would probably not use something like that. Moving on down, you are also curious if and when new Pokemon are added to the campaign, how much do you rely on the base stats? For the TOTS game specifically, almost not at all. I'll look at them and kind of see from like a competitive battling standpoint. I'm like, okay, what would this creature look like in D&D? In the beginning of the game, I took a lot of time to graft the creatures that we're going to run up against onto a monster manual creature so that they could have like lots of cool abilities. But that got really, really tiring and it wasn't super useful. So instead what we ended up doing is just going back to the decks that I had made before we started the game. So I still use those things from time to time. A lot of sort of boss creatures that the TOTS have run into are just really high level monster manual creatures that have been kind of grafted into this. Following on from that, would you or do you tone down stronger Pokemon and tune up weaker Pokemon so there isn't such a large power gap in the campaign? Yes. See Violet, see William. Anything that you use in the game at the table, I want it to feel viable. And if it feels bad or understated, it usually will get a big stat buff, just to make sure that it kind of feels like it's working along. For something like Riot or Shirley, which tend to get brought up a lot when we talk about balancing, Riot and Shirley were both very, very defensively strong, and those got tuned down so that it wouldn't feel like a mistake to not bring them. But Riot's still like really good, and so is Shirley. Taking half damage or like siphoning HP and stats from anything that hits you, those are very good abilities. So let's move on down. D-Swag 2014. Thanks for hitting a few of my questions. Thanks for asking them. It is so good to know about the city building for making your own region. These episodes are so great and I can't wait to get back into the series. Thank you and I love you too. One extra question. I know that you've had to think about your world a lot, being that you have so many questions being asked, but how does that differ from how you normally plan for a campaign? So the TOTS game is already very different from how I usually plan for a campaign. I am very reactive in the DM style for the TOTS. I will prep encounters and I will prep cities and towns and routes, but I don't ever determine before we sit down what's going to happen. So a huge part of the TOTS game is just reactive. Things are just sort of laid out and waiting for them, and I just kind of let them loose like kids in a candy store. and just see what they're interested in, and then that becomes what the story's about. So the Tots game has a lot of like weird inconsistencies, and again, we talk about tonal whiplash for stuff like this. It's just a very reactive setting. If the kids don't engage with something, I don't bring it up again, because I want to tell the story that they're interested in, and not necessarily like force them to deal with every minor plot hook I've come up with. It's much easier and more fun for me if they don't really care about something. Okay, then we move on. We'll use it some other time. Maybe we reintroduce it later. That doesn't mean we throw those hooks out. But the best example I can give you about like how the world got built is the Sneasels. They started as like this kind of fun, different one-off encounter. It ended with the catching of winter. Those Sneasels ended up being like the strongest thing they had fought to date. And they were super intrigued by them. So now there's a whole bunch of clans of Sneasels all around. So that's kind of how the Tots world gets built. As for how do I normally world build, usually what I'll do is, I mean, for anybody that's kind of tuned into any of the world building streams, you've definitely seen that. But a lot of the times what I would do back in the good old days, when I'm running like 5e D&D, grab a monster manual, flick through, find a monster that inspires you, build that monster's area, and then build a town nearby that is being targeted by that creature. So usually a lot of those are like hags, or maybe there's like a wight out in like a graveyard or something, and they're coming into town, they're stealing people, they're raising undead. So a lot of my world building back in the old days was like that, but now I tend to do a much more top-down view. I focus a lot more on like the culture of the people and their belief systems, and that will tell you an awful lot if you need to make a town really fast. If you already know how the people think and how they act, it's really easy to just kind of plug them in and go. So I tend to do a more top-down view now, but for the Tots game, definitely, it's a lot of, it's really nice to kind of have to think about things that have either been glossed over in the campaign or that I just haven't thought of, because you guys have a lot of very insightful questions, and it's really a fun exercise to try to figure out what the answer would be, because I don't have the answers all the time. Moving on down to maybe the simplest question of all time. Schwang. I has Nipsey. I don't think Nipsey would be anywhere near as prominent as they are without you, Schwang. But go ask Bentley. see if he'll give them to you. For anybody that doesn't know, Schwang is the reason that Nipsey is so prominent and is an emote over on Twitch, if you've ever hung out in those chats and see the Nipseys everywhere. Without Schwang, there is no prominence of Nipsey. So, absolutely, sir. You can, at the very least, I'm sure they would accept you as a spore bearer or something. We'll give you some kind of cool title. But let's move on down to another interesting question. Sylvian Blum. Why did CJ's sister turn into a banshee rather than a ghost Pokemon? My best guess is that certain ghost Pokemon have specific conditions they must meet before turning into a ghost, and if they don't meet those, they just turn into regular human ghosts. So I will answer this for you very directly. I've danced around the ghost questions a few times, but I think you guys have earned it. So every creature in the world has three parts of their body. They have a soul, they have a spirit, and they have a body. So they have the body. When you destroy the body, that releases the soul and the spirit. So the soul either moves on for judgment or has unresolved issues and has to stay. So that is why CJ's sister didn't go anywhere and didn't become anything else. She had unresolved business. She had a lot of emotion and a lot of hate and a lot of resentment for CJ. So she stuck around to get vengeance, whether she meant to or not. Now, that last little piece of them, the spirit, is what lingers on as either a harmless ghost, see something like Arthur, because they have unresolved business, but it's not negative. He is hanging out because he needs to make sure that his town and his people and Ruby are taken care of, and as soon as he knows that, he can move on. So as for how a ghost gets created, somebody with a tombstone finds those lingering spirits and corrupts them. So you will never find a ghost Pokemon just generated from nothing, at least in the TOTS game. I've thought a lot about this since we started the TOTS game, but that is where you will see ghost Pokemon forming. They are created. They are never they don't just apparate out of nowhere. They are born from something else. So you're actually pretty well onto something in your examples given. So like a Ghastly being created by this trigger, or a Shuppet from this, or a Duskull from this. I won't get into how I determine what they become, because that is a mechanic that we're not going to interface with, at least not in the short term. So that might be a better question for the Pearly Gates answers, when the game wraps up and we start speaking plainly, so to speak. But yes, basically you're pretty close, but CJ's sister became a banshee because she still had a grudge to settle, and that was the folklore answer that I found to be the best fit for what would happen to someone like Cordelia in the absence of a body and the presence of just an immense hatred for someone. Blaze Blade XD. Do some Pokemon on the team and wild Pokemon have multiple abilities at once? Yes. Yes, you are very observant. They absolutely do. So Nubster, the example given, has Thick Fat and Oblivious. Crash has a new ability that he got from the Source Stone, which I believe we called Flash Flood, but that has been placed on top of Torrent, so he still has both. So I do this for a very specific reason. We're playing in a setting without like traditional magic items and a way to grow. An easy way to do that for the Pokemon partners is to just give them another ability, another thing they can do. A lot of the times you'll only really see that if like a Source Stone is involved, or if they've come into contact with something that could help them grow. Stones and other sort of magic items that they stumble onto can definitely do that, but yeah, a lot of things have multiple abilities. Piggybacking from there, how do you determine what abilities each wild encounter has when it's a Pokemon with multiple ones? A lot of the times it's either chosen in bulk, if it makes sense. If they have, 2 or 3 abilities available to them and one makes way more sense than the other 2, then all of them will have that one. If there's a leader, a lot of the times the leader is the one with the strongest ability. See the Weaviles with the Sneasel clans. So that's definitely something that we do, but that's honestly just another part of encounter design. You just pick what makes sense or what's cool to you. Jordan Mikesell, will we ever know what those Clefairy were doing in that room? I don't think you want to know. There's peace in ignorance. Move on. Divine Dragon, would Blue lose their title if another individual won the league? Yes. So we touched on this a little bit in the gym leaders and the Pokemon League video. Absolutely. Yeah. If somebody wins the league, Blue would retire. And that's where we're going to end this video. Thank you so very much for watching. Thank you so very much for all of your questions. As always, please feel free, keep dropping those questions, comments, clarifications, anything like that in the comment section on this or any of the live videos. Those are the easiest places to find them and keep them organized. We will probably be moving to these going up only on Mondays, just to kind of preserve the series and give you guys a little more time to react, get some more questions out there. But all of this to say, I appreciate all of you very, very much. I will keep making these as long as you have questions, but be looking for them at 12 p.m. MST on Mondays going forward. That's also so that when we pick the TOTS back up, you can have a lab video on Monday and the TOTS video on Thursday. That way it's not like a double release on Thursdays, but just to kind of get that ball rolling. Be looking for these on Mondays. But I love y'all very much. Please keep those questions and comments coming in, and I will keep answering them as best I can. Thank you so much. Goodbye.